everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. Just like last month, I only read 3 books in August, so at the end of this video I'm also going to include my September TBR. So without further ado, let's jump into the first book that I finished in August, which I'm going to be completely honest with you, it was a forgettable book. So if I look like I'm struggling to remember what the book was about, that is why. So the first book that I finished was Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll. This is an adult, something between a mystery and a thriller. It seems to be what it's referred to as on Goodreads. Personally for me, I didn't find it particularly thrilling, and I also didn't feel like it had a large mystery role to it, so I don't really know what I would personally call it, but it's being turned into a movie apparently. I just heard about it yesterday. I think Mila Kunis is in it, so that's cool, but yeah, it was a pretty forgettable book for me, but I'll tell you about it as best as I can anyway, just in case you might be interested in reading it before you watch the film. So in this book we follow our main character called Tiffany, I think is how you pronounce it. It's spelled like Tiffany, so I'm not really sure how you're supposed to say it, but the book is told in the present and then in these sort of flashback chapters of her kind of explaining her life when she was younger. So in the present chapters, she kind of seems like the girl that has it all. She is a writer of this popular women's magazine. She's engaged to be married, but then in the flashback chapters, it takes place when she is a teenager and she starts going to a new school, and it just details the many things that happened to her after going to this new school and how those events turn her into the person that she is in the present day chapters, because she is quite an unlikable narrator. I do think that was one of the reasons that I struggled a little bit with this book, was because we had such an unlikable protagonist. And the thing is, she's not unlikable for no reason. Like, it's not that she's badly written or anything like that. She's actually very well written, but just being in her head all the time and hearing the stuff that she has to say in her inner monologue just made it difficult for me to get through, because I never really felt like she was a character I could root for, even though there's a reason behind the way that she is. So yeah, it's hard for me to explain that because it's not really like a fault of the book. It's just kind of like my own personal preference that I struggled to read it. It also, in a weird way, had very sort of flowery writing, which doesn't always work for me. But it also isn't something that I usually would expect to find in a book like this. It's something I usually find in like fantasy books, but this book did have very kind of flowery sort of writing. Like, there were just a lot of descriptions of things using like metaphors, I think is the word for it. I feel like an idiot. Some stuff like that. So the writing also didn't always work for me on top of the characters. As far as the actual plot of the book, like I said, I kind of went into this book thinking that it was going to be either a mystery or a thriller, but there isn't any real mystery throughout it. The only thing I could think of is that we know that there's this one big event that happened when she was in high school, and we know that like that is the, you know, turning point in her life, and that's like the only mystery, is that we just have to read up to that point to find out what it is. And there are like several hints, I guess, throughout this book that I think very clearly point to what the event is. So to me, it's not really a mystery. I don't think it's really a thriller either. There's this one point in the book that's kind of suspenseful, I guess, but it's not really a thriller either. This is, for me, felt more just like a contemporary sort of book, which usually I only read contemporaries when they're thrillers, mysteries, or romances, and this book just didn't feel like any of those things. So I think if I went into it with a different idea of what it was going to be about, I maybe would have enjoyed it better, but all of those things combined, like the writing, the fact that I really didn't like the main character, and then that it just wasn't what I expected at all, just landed this book a kind of a 3-star rating. And like I said, it was a little bit forgettable for me just because there weren't like there's only like one big kind of turning moment that happens in the book, and that is what I can remember. and that's about it. So I don't know that I would necessarily recommend this book. I guess it was good enough that it was being turned into a film, but I think personally I would just tell people to wait for the film to come out, and hopefully that will be better and also will take less time to consume than a whole book that took me quite a few days to read. So yeah, that was the first book that I read in August. I hope that I explained it well. I'm still a little bit rusty at this whole filming thing. The next two books that I read are actually nonfiction sort of books, and the reason I say sort of is because the first book is called Catskill Ghosts. So this is a collection of ghost tales, so that's why I say kind of nonfiction, because there's a bit of fiction to it, but it's basically just a collection of these ghostly encounters that take place in the Catskills in New York. So the reason I picked this book up specifically is because when I was a kid, the Catskills is an area that me and my family used to drive through when we would go to visit family, and I haven't been there in a really long time, but I thought it would be interesting to pick this book up and see if there are any places that I recognized, or maybe if we ever went that way again, that we could actually stop by some of these places and visit, whether they were open places like museums or stuff like that, or just drive past people's houses like creepy people. But upon actually reading this book, I've come to realize that this is not just about Catskill, like the town or whatever. This is about the whole Catskill region, which is very large and comprised of many different towns, some of which I've never even heard of before, and upon looking them up would just be completely out of the way for me to go and visit some of these places. So once again, I didn't quite get out of this book what I was hoping to. I ended up also giving this about 3 stars. This wasn't the best written book in the world, in my opinion. It's very short, but I felt like it could have been even shorter because so many of these stories just felt like fluff just to like fill up some of the pages. Like you could obviously tell that some of these had some kind of substance to them, like some of them could actually be real encounters of spirits, and there were like many different witnesses to these ghostly encounters, whereas some of them were just kind of like stories that you could obviously tell were made up, but also like if you're gonna make up a story, at least make it interesting, because like some of these weren't even that cool, so I was like, why are they in here? So yeah, it was already pretty short, but I felt like it could have been shorter because I just thought a lot of it was just there to try to up the page count. This book was also in desperate need of a proofreader or an editor because there were a lot of typos in this book, and then at one point there's a whole paragraph that just repeats itself, not quite word for word, because you could tell that the second paragraph had been edited and then the author just forgot to delete the first one, but I was just like, man, this book needed a proofreader. But anyways, yeah, so I was a little bit disappointed with this book. Probably about half of it was actually filled with interesting stories, but the other half just kind of felt like a bit of a waste. Overall, I gave it 3 stars, so that's that. And the final book that I picked up in August is called Abandoned Catskills by Cindy Vasco. As you could tell, I had a little bit of a theme going on at the end of August. So this is not so much a book, it's really more a collection of photographs of some abandoned buildings around the Catskills, but I still included it on my Goodreads one because I'm kind of behind in how many books I would like to read this year, but also because under each picture is, well, at the beginning of each sort of chapter, so it's split up by like 4 or 5 different sections. So the first one is resorts, hotels, and bungalows. The other one is businesses and services. The third one is amusement attractions, and the fourth one is adult care, medical facilities, and there is a 5th one, which is homes. So at the beginning of each chapter, there's a little bit about like the author and her a relationship with each of these places, a little bit about her like past and stuff like that, and then under each photograph is a little bit of a history about each place, which I thought was extremely interesting, and I felt like I learned a lot from this. One of the places that she went to was actually the Catskill Game Farm, which I think closed in 2006, but it was basically like a big zoo slash kind of amusement sort of park, and I actually can't remember if I actually went there, but I know it was a place that like my mom used to go to before it closed, so it was interesting to see all of the abandoned pictures. But then, like I said, under each picture was a little bit about the place, so like what kind of animals that it had. Apparently the guy that owned it, he actually like bred this certain breed of wild horses, and he is considered like one of the people that actually kept this breed going, otherwise it would have died out. So it was a lot of interesting stuff. There was another section about the adult care facilities, in which one of the places that was abandoned because there were these 2 patients that wandered off, died, and it took hours for anybody at the facility to realize that they were gone, and that is why they shut down and it was just abandoned like it was. So it was really interesting to learn the history behind some of these places, but it was also equally as interesting to look at the pictures of some of the places that we don't have an explanation as to why they were abandoned, which was mostly in the home and like mansion section of this book. Like there are some beautiful mansions that were just abandoned with all of their belongings left there, and you just wonder like what happened to these families. Like clearly there are toys there, like there were children that lived there, and then they just up and left everything behind. So it was fascinating learning about these places, but equally interesting wondering why some of them were just left the way that they were. And of course the pictures were absolutely beautiful. Like the home section of this book was definitely my favorite because of some of the mansion pictures. A lot of them you could tell were from the 70s. I'm just going to show you one. This one here is of a hallway with this like green patterned wallpaper. It's very 70s, which I just love. So yeah, the pictures in here were lovely to look at, and like I said, I love learning about the different places. So this was definitely my favorite book that I read in August. So I would definitely recommend it. I actually think this author has many photography books out just specifically about abandoned places, not just in New York, but I think there were some in like New Jersey and stuff like that that I saw on Goodreads. So I'm definitely going to be interested in looking out for some of her other works in the future. Now moving on to the books that I hope to get to in September. My cat is just all over the place here. Look at her, living in my bookshelf. Anyways, I have about 4 books on my TBR for September, and then 1 book that I'm just going to slowly be reading throughout the month. I highly doubt that I will finish it, but I'm going to try my best. I actually feel like at the end of August is when I started to get a little bit more into reading, and also just like finding a better schedule of when I have time to read, with just adjusting to having the cats and going to work and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm hoping that September will be a better reading month, but we will see. I don't want to jinx myself. So there are 3 books that I'm actually currently reading. The first one, the one that I am reading most often at the moment, is called 14 Ways to Die by Vincent Ralph. This is a young adult mystery, I guess you would call it. We're following our main character called Jessica, I believe is her name, and when she was really young, her mother was killed by this serial killer called the Magpie Man, and her mother was actually his first victim, but since then he has killed 12 other people, and he has yet to be caught. So she actually gets the opportunity to be a part of this like YouTube show where they like live stream people's lives of people that like interesting things have happened to them. So she wants to be on this show to kind of shed more light on her mother's murder, to see if somehow that will help get the guy caught. The only reason I'm still reading this book is because the chapters are extremely short, so whenever I do pick it up, I feel like I read through it pretty quickly. I'm over 160 pages in, but this book is so unrealistic. Like, you really have to suspend your belief when reading this book because just so many things about it would never happen in real life. But I'm gonna finish it because I'm over 150 pages in and I just want to be done with it. So that's that. The next book that I'm currently reading was on my August TBR and I never got around to finishing it, but that is Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 3rd book in the Throne of Glass series. I'm still enjoying it, but I had to actually return my copy back to the library and I couldn't put it on hold any longer because I had already requested an extension for 2 months and I still didn't get around to finishing it. So I had to return it to the library. I ended up just buying a little paperback copy me for like $10 because I wanted to just buy the hardcover book because I have the first book in hardcover, but apparently this book is super expensive to get in hardcover like new, so I just bought the paperback one, and I'm about 136 pages into this book, and I've been reading it for like 3 months, so I would really like to finish it this month, but we'll see how it goes. And then the other book that I'm currently reading, but I highly doubt that I will actually finish this month, is of course The Two Towers. I've been reading this book since January, so I don't anticipate to finish it this month, but I have been reading it a bit more than usual because I've been taking this book to work with me and reading it on my break because it's just very small and nicely fits in my lunch bag. So yeah, hopefully I will make some decent progress on it this month, but I doubt that I will finish it. And then of course, because we are heading into the spooky season of the year, I have got 2 kind of spookier books on my TBR. The first one we have is Bring Me Back by B.A. Paris. This is another one of those books where I'm not sure if it's a mystery or a thriller, but I'm hoping this one will actually fall into one of these categories when I read it. I've read 2 other books by this author and I loved both of them, and they were both like mystery thriller kind of books, so I have high hopes that this one will actually deliver on those genres. But yeah, I have no idea what this book is about. I just know that I've loved other books by this author, so I definitely want to pick it up soon, and September just seems like a good month for it. And then the final book on my TBR is called Spooky New York. So as you can see, I'm on a bit of a kick about books set in New York. So this is another like fiction but non-fiction kind of book. This is tales of hauntings, strange happenings, and other local lore. So I think a lot of it is just going to be kind of like urban legends that are set in New York, as well as just like strange things that have taken place in New York. There is a little contents page on the inside that says each of the like stories or titles or whatever, and then where it supposedly takes place. So this takes place over everywhere. Like some of them are in New York City, some of them are in upstate New York. It's kind of all over New York. Some of the places I recognize, some of them I don't, but I'm hoping this will be a pretty interesting book. I love urban legends and stuff like that. I also like reading about weird occurrences that have happened, so I'm hoping this is going to be a pretty interesting book, and it does seem like the perfect time of year to pick it up. So yeah, those are the 3 books that I read in August, as well as all the books that I hope to get to in September. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!